All right, Biology 11. Today we're going to finish off the circulatory system. We're picking up from where we left off last day in terms of our online lecture notes. This was the last one that we did. Again, the same format as usual. Our online lecture notes are up here on the iPad. And then I'll be drawing diagrams and explanations on the whiteboard. Last day we talked about the three layers of the heart: the myocardium, myo meaning muscle; the endocardium, meaning the inner lining, endo is inner; and the pericardium, para meaning the outer lining of the heart, like perimeter of a shape, right, from math class. Cardium, of course, is in all three of the words. It means heart. So we covered this slide last day, so we'll start there for today. The chambers of the heart. Now, a chamber is a hollow area, or I think of it as a room in the heart, right? In fact, the French word for room is chambre, right? So chamber is like a room or a hollow area of the heart. And we've got a four-chambered heart, right? There are two rooms upstairs and two rooms downstairs. The two upstairs rooms are the atria, right? That's plural for atrium. So we have a left and a right atrium. These are the top two rooms in the heart, or hollow areas in the heart. And then the bottom rooms, the lower ones, are called ventricles. And again, we've got a left ventricle and a right ventricle. All right? So we've got a right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Four rooms in the heart. Excuse me. So here are a couple of heart diagrams here. This one kind of shows it more anatomically correct. And this one shows it. This is obviously an artist picture here. And we can see the rooms a little bit better here. Now, if this is your first time really looking at the heart up close, it can be kind of confusing. All right? So one of the things I always draw in class is a box diagram of the heart. Right? And what I mean by a box diagram is this thing right here. All right? This is my box diagram of the heart. You can see this shows the shape of your actual heart. Your heart is in a, nice neat box like this. But this allows us to see the rooms within the heart pretty easily, and the major blood vessels that lead into and out of the heart. All right? Now, before we go over our box diagram and the flow of blood through the heart, I just want to remind you that the heart diagram that I'm going to post on Edsby for you, when you look at it, right is left and left is right. Now, what I mean by that is, we'll look at this guy over here, right? So there's your friend. He or she's looking right at you. And if you say, okay, I'm looking at my friend, let's look to the left of my field of view. In my field of view, this is the left side. In my field of view, the stuff over here is in the right area of my field of view, right? But your friend is reversed of that. If you stuck out your right hand and they stuck out their right hand, they're on opposite sides. So here's my two hands. My right hand is over here. Their right hand is here. My left hand is here. Theirs is on the opposite side. They're facing you, so their perspective is opposite. So when we look at this box diagram of the heart, you're looking at it as if you're looking at the heart in your friend's chest. All right, so there's my friend. I'm looking at their heart. This is the right side over here, even though it's the left side of the diagram or page. And this is the left side of the heart, even though it's on the right side of my field of view or my page. All right, so I'm going to put that in here just as a reminder. So a little R up in the corner here. And I'm not using red or blue for a reason. We'll get into that in a second. And this is the left side. So again, right side of my heart, just like his right arm and right foot are over here. Left side of my heart, just like his left, right? Left, right. All right, I'm going to be using two colors here. I'm going to be using red and blue. The blue is for oxygen-depleted blood. This is the stuff that runs in primarily veins, but this is the stuff that's returning to the body that it's being used up. The oxygen has been grabbed by the 100 trillion cells, and it says, hey, it's sending it back to the heart and say, hey, go give this to the lungs. Go get some more oxygen for us. The blood that the heart pumps out that is oxygen rich, that's the red. And this is ironically how they go. The right side of the heart deals with the oxygen poor blood. The left side of the heart deals with the oxygen rich blood that just came back from the lungs. Right? Easy way to remember that. Left side and lungs both start with the L. All right? So we'll be using these colors. We're going to start over here on this side of the heart. So the right side of the heart, the order that these chambers operate in: 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? I will be posting this picture on ESB with all of the notes that I'm going to write on it today for you. So what we have here is the superior vena cava. Now there'll be another diagram with all of the labels in it. So we have the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. All right? If you want to label a heart diagram, I'll put one on there in a sec. You can label it while you're watching this video. I'll put a labeled heart onto your EDSB page for you. This is oxygen depleted blood that is returning from the upper body. So this is coming from our upper body. Your arms, shoulders, and your head have used up blood, right? Your brain used up the oxygen in it, and now it's sending it back to the heart to go get a refill of oxygen. This is coming from our lower body. And this is blood that was used up by, well, the organs in your abdominal area, like your liver and your kidneys and that. The muscles of the lower area of the body, right? The muscles in your legs and your feet and your abdominal area, right? All of those cells, they used up oxygen, and now that used up blood is coming back to the heart to get a refill of oxygen. All right? And so it enters here at the right atrium. This is the right atrium. Remember, the atria are the top chambers of the heart. The ventricles are the bottom ones, right? So it enters here, and the atrium pumps it down through this thing. Now we see here, this is a valve, and the heart has 4 valves in it. There's one here, one here, one here, and one here. Now what a valve is a one-way doorway. It's like saloon doors that were built too long, right? And so they're like this, and they can open, or I guess we'll go with this orientation. They can open this way, but when you try to, open them the other way, because usually saloon doors are spaced perfectly like this, where they can swing both ways like that. These ones were built too long. They're too close together, so they can open in and let things down in this direction, but they can't open up. So if you try to go that way, it's not going to happen. So basically, once you go through the valve, it closes behind you if you try to go up. Same thing here. Blood comes down here, deoxygenated blood, and it can't go back up. These two parts will push back together. We can see the valves here in this diagram, 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right? So now the blood has entered the right ventricle. All right? There's nowhere for the blood to go but now up. We know it can't go up in this direction, but look at the orientation of this valve. This is a downward valve. This one is upward. So now what happens is the blood, when the ventricle squeeze, gets forced up through this one-way doorway. All right? We'll name these valves in a little bit. And it goes up, and then it hits this fork in the road. All right? Excuse me. This fork in the road is the pulmonary artery, right? Arteries go away from the heart. This is the pulmonary valve, all right? And so it hits this fork in the road. Now, why do we have a fork in the road at the top of this? Well, where is this blood going? It is still blue. It is still oxygen poor blood. There's no oxygen in it. And where it's going is the lungs. So this is going to the left lung, and this one is going to the right lung. All right? So the blue is the oxygen poor blood. It comes into the right side of the heart, goes atria, down to ventricle, up and out through the pulmonary artery, out to the lungs. The lungs, if you remember, the job of the lungs is to get oxygen into the blood. So now we're going to switch from our blue to our red. Red is oxygen-rich blood, and this side of the heart deals with the returning blood from the lungs that now has it's oxygen-rich. It has a lot of oxygen in it. Those red blood cells have grabbed the oxygen. Now, coming from the right lung here, we have the pulmonary vein, and it's the right pulmonary vein that comes in on this side. And this side is the left pulmonary vein. And these are coming into the heart from the lungs. The lungs have breathed in the oxygen. Blood's full of oxygen. The red blood cells are thriving. And so it returns the blood to the left atrium. Now, if we look at the atrium, blood's coming in this way. There's no way for it to go but down through this one-way doorway, of course. So the atrium squeezes the blood down through this one-way doorway. This is another one of these valves. So again, blood can go down. If it tries to go up, these two little parts will lock together and not allow that, right? And it goes down into the left ventricle. Put that in red because it's oxygen-rich blood. So the ventricle then squeezes, and the blood can't go up here, but if you look, here's another valve orientated in the opposite direction. So now when the ventricle squeezes, the blood can travel up through this. Now this artery here leading away from the heart, this one that curls in and behind and actually comes out through the bottom, if you can see that little part there, this is the aorta. And the blood will go up through the aorta and hit this area. Now the aorta has three branches that come out of the top. You can see them in each of the diagrams here. 1, 2, and 3, and then 1, 2, and 3 here. Arm, head, arm, right? We've got three major extensions that are above the heart. Our two arms and our head. So that's where this is going. So blood will go out through here, and this goes to our upper body. I'll try to write that in neatly after the fact. So when you see this diagram on Edsby, I'll have upper body written neatly in there because I don't want to try to do it now because it might come out sloppy. And I'll take my time and do it at my desk in a bit. So blood goes out through the top part of the body. And blood also, you can see the aorta curls down and around, and it comes out through here. This is the oxygen-rich blood now being sent to the lower body. Make that arrow a little bit more noticeable. So this will feed the abdominal organs. This will feed your legs and your feet, right? Your lower body gets fed by this. So the aorta, blood goes out to the arm, the head, and the other arm, down and around, and to the lower body, your internal organs and your legs. All right? The upper body uses up the oxygen in the blood. The lower body uses up the oxygen in the blood. And where does it return? Well, we're back over here again. The used up blood comes up through the inferior vena cava, and the used up blood from the upper body comes in through the superior vena cava. Superior meaning above the heart. Superior is above. Inferior is below. This is blood that returns from below the heart. All right? And I'll put some extra stuff on here, like I said. But that's the basic blood flow of heart, or blood flow through the heart that is on this slide. So I'll bring it all up and we'll go through it again. Excuse me. So blood enters the heart from the upper body and the lower body at the right atrium. The blood from the lower body comes in it from the inferior vena cava. The blood from the upper body through the superior vena cava. It enters here, the right atrium, the top room on the right side of the heart. What happens? Blood then goes through a valve called the tricuspid valve. All of these terms are on this note. This is our tricuspid valve, our one-way doorway. That the tricuspid is between the right atrium and the right ventricle. So it goes through that one-way doorway. Now it's in the right ventricle. The ventricle squeezes and it goes up through the pulmonary artery. Arteries lead blood away. Artery and away start with A. So artery, this is the pulmonary artery. It's going away to the lungs. There's a lung beside the heart here and one over here. So it goes out and out. We breathe in. Oxygen diffuses into those red blood cells, and they have to return now to the heart. So blood returns to the heart full of oxygen through the pulmonary veins. Pulmonary means lungs. Pulmonary artery, away to the lungs. Pulmonary veins, returning from the lungs. It enters now the left atrium, the top room on the left side of the heart, gets squeezed downward into the left ventricle by passing through the bicuspid valve. So tricuspid, bicuspid. Goes down the bicuspid valve and then up through the aortic valve because it leads to the aorta. So it goes up through the aortic valve. Some of the blood is given out to the upper body and some of the blood goes down below. Gets used up and then we're back here. In, down, up, out, get oxygen. In, down, up, out to the body. Gets used up, in, down, up, out, oxygen. In, down, up, out, body. So it just keeps repeating like that. All right? Easy enough. Here's a diagram. Now this diagram is great because it's labeled, all the parts are labeled, but it also shows the blood flow. The gray arrows are like our blue ones. It's oxygen depleted blood. The red arrows are like our red arrows. It's oxygen rich blood. This is a box diagram. This is a little bit more representative of the shape of the heart in your chest. So I like this diagram because it brings the two of them together. I'll put more heart diagrams and blood flow through the heart on our EDSB page, and I'll explain that stuff if you have any questions. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is how do we control our heart rate? All right, when the heart is beating, how do we look after that? So first of all, if you think of your heart like a drum, it doesn't go like this. Right? There's a pattern to it. If I were in class and I said, hey, I want you to, beat on your desk and do the how your heart would sound, you'd go. It's like boom, 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 boom. There's that little rest. It's not a continuous boom, 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 right? It's rest, rest, rest. So that's why I wrote bump, bump, and then the 3 dots. It's like a little rest. Why? What is that, right? Well, let's start with the brain because the brain controls everything. In our head, we've got the medulla oblongata. You remember the medulla oblongata because it controls your breathing rate as well. The medulla oblongata is a very important part of the brain. It controls your breathing rate and your heart rate, right? So pretty important stuff. And what happens is this part of the brain sends down an impulse, an electrical signal to the pacemaker. Now, normally when you think of a pacemaker, you're thinking, well, that's a man-made device that regulates heartbeat that sometimes, people get if they have heart trauma. We have a natural pacemaker. So the little, machine or robotic pacemaker replaces that. Our pacemaker, right? So we'll go down to the heart here. And I'm just going to draw these 4 things. I don't know if you can hear that banging. That's Macy the Wonder Dog's tail off of the glass door that's behind me. She's out there wagging her tail and it's banging off the glass door. I don't know if that's coming across in the video. Maybe you can't even hear it, but I can hear it. It's like bing, bing. It's not a heart rate. It's continuous, right? So the medulla oblongata hits the SA node, sends an electrical impulse. I'll try to draw a little lightning bolt here, down to the SA node. The SA node stands for sinoatrial, all right? It's right here. What that does is it makes the two atria, the two top chambers of the heart, it makes them squeeze. And when they squeeze, blood does what? Well, it goes down to the bottom, into the ventricles. As soon as the SA node fires, almost immediately after, the AV node fires. And the AV node is located in between the two ventricles. And what it does is it causes the, I'll put AV here. So after it hits here, electrical impulse, again, very, very fast. Nervous impulses and travel incredibly quick. The SA node fires, the two top chambers squeeze. When they squeeze, blood goes down. Then the AV node fires. Atrioventricular, ventricular, right? Ventricles, the bottom room. When they squeeze, well, it can't go back up here, but it goes back up and out. On this side, out to the lungs. On this side, out to the rest of the body. Right? Like in our box diagram. So if I bring that back up, the SA node fires and blood goes down into here. The AV node fires and the ventricle squeeze and it's up and out. On this side to the lungs, on this side out to the body. All right? So basically we have top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, squeeze, 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 squeeze. Right? Now what about that little rest? Because we haven't talked about the rest yet, right? So squeeze, squeeze. Down, out, down, out, down, out, down, out. That little rest allows blood to refill the heart on both sides. So the used up blood can come into the top. The oxygen-rich blood from the lungs can come into the top. That's what the rest is for. It's to refill the heart. And we know blood enters the heart at the two top rooms. So now it's squeeze the blood down, boom. Squeeze the blood out, boom. Rest. Blood comes in. Down, out. Rest. Down, out. Rest. Right? So hopefully that makes sense now. Why our heart has that weird sort of heartbeat. And that's why we get the down, out, down, out, down, out, rest, rest, rest. All right. Next thing, blood pressure. So with the blood pressure, we all go get our blood pressure taken all the time when we get a medical, or if you're like me, every time you're in Walmart, you jump in that little machine there and you stick your arm in there. It gets pretty tight, but I can handle it. I'm a big boy, so I get my blood pressure taken. My blood pressure is quite normal, by the way, in case you were wondering. Sir's doing all right. So what blood pressure actually is, it's the pressure exerted on the inner walls of your blood vessels as blood travels through them. So think of your blood vessel like a hose, right? It's pretty easy to do that because they basically are. And blood is being squeezed through them in, one direction or the other. Now, if I have just a trickle of blood going through here, there's hardly any pressure on the hose. If I have a ton of blood rushing through there at any given moment, there's a lot more pressure on the inside of it. Think of a garden hose, right? If I turn on a garden hose full blast, I can feel, right, the hose is rigid, and I can feel the water going through there. There's a lot of water rushing through there. It's exerting a lot of internal pressure. Pressure on the hose in this direction, right? All along the outer area of the hose, right? On that inner wall, it's pushing outward. So our blood pressure is a measure of that. It's basically a measure of blood flow and a measure of how hard your heart is working, which is very important to your health. We need proper blood flow because your blood is sharing all the good things your body makes to the other areas of the body. And you need a healthy heart because, like we said before, if it stops, you stop. We can't have that. So your blood pressure, or if you're watching those shows like Pretty Hospital and that, your BP, right? BP is, and they'll say the two numbers. BP is blood pressure. when you're watching McDreamy and McSteamy and whoever the other guys are. The wife unit watches those. I don't. I just know those two names. Pretty hospital. I worked in a hospital. They are not that pretty in the hospital. Wherever that, what is that hospital? Something Grace or something. It's got the most stunning staff of model doctors and nurses I've ever seen. In reality, if you've ever been to the hospital, you know it's not that way. Pretty hospital. Anyway, what you'll get is a fraction, right? And so, for example, 120/80, right? That's the average, or that's the good blood pressure reading for an average adult, right? This top number is the systolic pressure. This bottom number is the diastolic pressure. Now, systolic is when the heart is squeezing. Remember, we just talked about the heart. Boom, boom, rest. Boom, rest. Boom, boom, rest. Well, think about that. That's like those little hand pumps at the CNE. You ever see those hand pumps? There's a spout here like this, right? And the water comes up and out like that. And then there's a handle here on a hinge. And you got to make the handle go up and down. And the faster you pump the handle up and down, the more the water comes out. And I think there's like a duck race or something. Every year I destroy my kids in that duck race when the CNE is held. So the water comes out, but the water comes out in waves. Every time I make the handle go up and down, a gush of water comes out, right? Up, boom, squeeze the water out. Rest, squeeze the water out, right? So it's rest, squeeze, just like. So just like this water travels in waves, so does our blood. Our blood has the squeeze, right? The surge, and then the rest. This is the pressure when the heart is squeezing. And diastolic is the pressure when the heart is at rest, when it has that little bit of rest. So our blood actually travels kind of like this. Boom, 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 boom. So this is when the heart is squeezing. This is like our systolic. Then the little rest in between, that's our diastolic. And then boom, boom, rest. Boom, boom, rest. Right? So this is the squeeze, this is the rest. Well, the pressure on the inner wall of the blood vessel is higher when one of the squeezed waves of blood is traveling by. That's this tall, higher number. And then we have the pressure from when the heart is at that brief moment of rest. That's the lower number, right? 120/80 is a pretty good blood pressure reading. If the blood pressure is too high, right? Let's say you had 150, or too low, say it was around 90. Too high or too low? What's the danger of too high? Well, now you've got too much fluid, getting forced through that. And the pressure on the inner wall of your blood vessel is too high, and the blood vessel could rupture. And that could lead to something like a stroke or an aneurysm, right? If the blood pressure is too low, that means the flow of blood through the heart is kind of down to a trickle now. And the blood is bringing the oxygen and the glucose that you need to make energy. And if it's not really delivering a whole lot of it because blood's down to a trickle, that means there's vital areas of the body that aren't going to get enough glucose and oxygen and not be able to make ATP. And if you're not making ATP, you're dying, right? So both of those things are really bad. High blood pressure and low blood pressure. And that's one of the first things that when you go get a medical or you go get a checkup or see the doctor, he or she will take your blood pressure. It kind of gives an overall reading of just how just how everything's going in terms of circulation. The little cuff thingy, right? That little thing that they go and squeeze it up, and then you feel like your the circulation's gonna get cut off. That's called a sphygmomanometer. Sphygmomanometer. There it is there, sphygmomanometer. That's the blood pressure taking tool. All right? You can practice saying it at home. Blood vessels. This is our last topic, I believe, the blood vessels. 3 types of blood vessels. So, I can get rid of valve. We have arteries. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. There's a misconception that arteries carry oxygen-rich blood. That is not true. Our pulmonary artery, if you remember, our pulmonary artery is this thing here, and it's away from the heart out to the lungs. This pulmonary artery carries oxygen-depleted or oxygen-poor blood. So it's got nothing to do with oxygen. Arteries go away from the heart. Any sort of blood flow that is away from the heart is an artery. As arteries go further and further away from the body, they become smaller and become arterioles. Arterioles are just smaller arteries, all right? And they still go away from the heart. Next, we have veins. Veins take blood back to the heart, right? And small veins are called venules, right? Now, most arteries carry oxygen-rich blood. Most veins carry oxygen-depleted blood. But again, here's the pulmonary vein, and it's got, right, it's returning to the heart from the lungs, and it's got oxygen-rich blood. So again, it's not always an oxygen thing. And then what might be the most important ones are the capillaries or capillaries, whatever way you want to say it is fine. Capillaries are the smallest ones, and these are the exchange points. When your blood has to trade or give substances to the cells of your body, it's done through capillaries. We talked about capillaries in the villi of the small intestine. The nutrients absorb through the wall of the intestine, go into capillaries that are in the villi, and then they can go out to the body. But that exchange between the intestine and the blood is done through capillaries. We talked about capillaries on the alveoli of the lungs. The oxygen comes into the alveoli and crosses into, through the wall of the alveoli, into the blood, into capillary nets that surround the alveoli. So anytime there's a trade-off or an exchange between the body and blood, it's done through capillaries. All right. Now, if we look at them, here's a diagram that kind of shows them both. Arteries and veins have thick muscular walls. Both of them have thick muscular walls. Arteries tend to have thicker muscular walls than veins. Capillaries have no muscle in their walls. Their walls have to be thin so that stuff can be exchanged or traded across it. So it can't have the same thick muscular walls. In fact, some capillaries are so small that red blood cells have to travel through them in single file. That's how small capillaries are. Blood cells traveling through them in single file, one at a time. So I want to go over an artery and a vein. So we know that they both have thick muscular walls. The arteries is a little bit thicker. Now, I'm going to draw a picture here of this guy's foot up close, or his leg. All right, so there's his leg. Now, an artery, right, if he's standing here, an artery would come down if we're feeding the foot. An artery would come down and blood would just boom, boom, boom. And it has no problem going down the way, right? This is our artery. And blood just drops down no problem, because who is helping the blood fall, downward? Well, there's gravity. And if you look at it where the heart is, right, if I put that marker there, the majority of our body gets blood flow assisted by gravity. Now, if I draw the vein that would return, the vein that would come back up towards the heart, it would run through his leg like that. But there are these little vein valves in here. There's the tail off the glass again. And what happens here is you can see our vein has to work against gravity. And that's a tougher job, right? Going downhill is easy. Pedaling your bike uphill, well, that's a lot more work. So what happens is the blood does this. It gets pushed up, boom, boom. And gravity would make that blood sink back down. But instead what happens is this vein valve stops it. So boom, it gets locked in this little compartment right here. And the valve, this one-way doorway, you can see them all, they're all orientated to let things go up through, lock the blood in. Then the next boom, right? The next squeeze of the heart, boom, blood's in this compartment, boom, into here, boom, into here, boom. So our vein has valves in it, right? Because they have to work against gravity, and that's an uphill battle. All right, so there's a picture there of the vein valves. We can go up through it, no problem, but we can't go back down, which is a good thing, or all the blood would just gather in the bottom of our feet and our body. Anyway, that's all I got. I hope it was crystal clear. You can see Robin once again has been talking back to Batman, and Batman decided to put him in line. I'll let you read that when you get to it online. That's it. Hope it's crystal clear. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, fire them off in the comment section below this video. Or if you're in my class, reach out to me through Edsby. Anyway, I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.